And happy Thursday, Xavier basketball fans. This is your weekly Razorcast. That's Jim Reaker and Jeff Zink talking Muskie basketball, and which is a bit of a gloomy week to match this gloomy but warm weather. We'll get into lots of those things that have transpired and that we hoped wouldn't happen when we talked last week. But first, let me welcome Jim to the program.
Hey, Jeff. Yep, sun came up this morning, Xavier fans. A little blurry out there, but we'll be okay. We'll be okay. You know, come back off the ledge. Everything's okay. Just to put it in perspective, though, I was reading the boards last night, and some people are just, you know, this team's the worst team we've had. They're not going to make a run. Chris Mack can't coach. It's just, it's very amusing. But put it in perspective, Xavier fans, think of this. Michigan State, number one last week before they lost to Ohio State, got blown out by Ohio State, almost got beat by Rutgers at home last night, had to go into overtime to beat Rutgers, which is an improved program. But, you know, so I'm saying if I went and read the Michigan State boards last night or this morning, they'd be saying probably the same thing. You know, Tom Izzo can't coach. Miles Bridges is not he's not the best player in the country. So, but, you know, that's why we love it. It's fun. It's not life or death, but it is fun, and we'll be okay, I think.
Yeah, the first comment I'll make on that is those are probably the same guys that a couple weeks ago were asking if this was the best Xavier team ever. And, you know, so that's what true fanatics do. They go this way and they go that way. And I'm with you. This team's going to be fine. They're still in the top 25, but, you know, they're hitting a rough patch. And as we'll see, you know, there's potential. And I put down in my notes saying if they can't get it turned around, we might, we hope that January 2018 doesn't become February 2017. And I said when we were talking about that, could it be the best team ever? January was going to be the key, and they're not off to the start that they want. And, yeah, things are going to be okay, but let's not pretend there aren't a couple of holes in the dike, too, that need to be taken care of. So let's jump right into it. Before we can get to last night's big game, which ended up not really being that big of a game, we got to talk about Saturday in Providence, where the Muskies stumbled. You know, who knows if they were looking ahead to last night's game, you know, all kinds of factors. But I think some of the things that we saw Saturday are also what tripped us up last night.
Yeah, game's fairly similar. Musketeers didn't play, you know, they didn't play well, obviously, but there were some positives. And that game was at the 13:21 mark was tied 16-16, and then the Providence Friars went on an 8-0 run. And really, if you look at it, that was the difference in the game right there. From that point on, it was pretty much an even game on out, but the Musketeers couldn't play even. They had to get themselves back into the game. And I recall back in the second half, they did get it down to 4 at one point. You thought they were going to turn the corner, but just couldn't hit the big shot when they needed to get over the hump. And, you know, again, we've talked about it on this show, and we've talked about it on our Trogcast. The Big East is tough. There are no easy outs in the Big East, and when you're playing on the road, it becomes even tougher. And a stat I heard, I can't verify this, but I'm pretty sure I heard this, and I'd have to qualify this, but since what we call the new Big East, which we're in our 5th season, the third winningest coach is Ed Cooley with the Providence Friars. So it's not like they're just a pushover. He has some key players playing very well for him. In fact, Rodney Bullock did not play the game before because of the flu. We talked about that. We didn't know if he was going to play. He did play. He played very, very well. He had 17 points. And then you got Kyron Cartwright, who's been a great player for years. He goes off and scores 19. And then they had Isaiah Jackson throw in 18. So, yeah, there was and the big names for Xavier did not play well, of course. Trayvon Blewett, of course, everybody wants to know what's wrong with him. He was 2 for 5 from the free throw line and 2 for 5 from 3 points. J.P. McCura only had 9 points and was 1 for 6 from 3-point. And here's the one that really, it's perplexing me a little bit, although I did read something this morning that made a little bit of sense. Somebody brought a point up, but Kaiser Gates, somebody even asked on the board, did he dress for those last two games? Because he has just become a non-factor. In fact, against Providence, he had 1 rebound and no points. I mean, Kaiser Gates, we've been singing his praises as how he's turned the corner, and something going on there, not sure what it is. Somebody alluded to the fact that he hasn't really played well since he had that concussion. And I thought, didn't think about that, because I was thinking, he's not hurt. I don't think he said, oh, yeah, I forgot about that. Remember when him and Makura actually set a game out? Both of them had concussions there in that stretch in the end of December. So hopefully that's not a factor. Maybe it is. I'm not sure. Here's maybe with Kaiser Gates, maybe he's human. Maybe he has bad days. Maybe he has bad weeks. I don't know. Maybe he's had a bad 2 or 3 weeks.
He had an Opie against the Friars. I mean, only shot 2, but missed both field goals, 0 for 2 3-point land. The stats for me, just 1 rebound in 23 minutes, and that's one of the reasons he's in there. But, yeah, it's just when you look at the other side, and I think this is the key to these 2 games, and I don't know yet if it's Xavier leveling out after a hot start or not, but both these teams we're going to talk about just had hot games. When you look at the Friars line compared to the Muskies line, I mean, they shot 46.4 from the field. On 8 fewer shots, they had just as many, only a couple fewer free throws. They shot 41% from 3 and 91% from the line, 20 of 22, where Xavier kind of went back to last year's habits of just 65. And this is even with the Muskies out-rebounding them by 16. But another stat that kicks up that might be the difference, and I think when we get into the Villanova game, is also the difference. 19 assists by the Friars. They found a way to help each other out, and that was 7 more than the Muskies. So it could be that we just hit Providence at the wrong time. It was at home. It was another one of those Saturday afternoon starts. Xavier didn't play absolutely poorly, but they didn't play up to what we've come to expect.
Yeah, and throw one other stat at you. And so, again, just put everything in perspective. Since Xavier joined the Big East, you know what their record is at Providence?
Not good.
1-4. So this has been a place where we've had trouble winning. In fact, that one victory, I recall, trying to think if it was either last season or 2 seasons ago, and they were down, and near the end of the game, J.P. Makura hit a couple circus 3-pointers, and they ended up pulling that out. So Providence is a tough place to play. And I mentioned on the Trodcast that there were some other issues, not to make excuses, but because of the weather out there, the Musketeers had to change their flight. That got delayed because there was a hockey game at the Wells Fargo on Friday night. They didn't get to shoot around the day before. It was on the road. It's hard to win on the road in the Big East. Not making excuses, but we'd hoped they would win that, but it wasn't a total collapse. In fact, look at the positives. I mean, here's something that's really emerged. Karam Cantor, 24 points. He was 10 for 15, and if you watch the game, he was the one that almost got him back into it, and they just couldn't stop him. And so, how that works out, he's just gotten better and better since the beginning of the season. I think he's going to be an important piece down the road for the Musketeers because he brings a different style of play that they really don't have anybody else that we talk about sometimes on here, the old man game. He understands angles. He understands how to get position and use his feet underneath to get some easy shots. And he did it again last night. Well, I know we're going to talk about Villanova, but he again was the positive last night.
He was, and just to watch you're mixing your place there. Don't want to get anybody in Rhode Island upset, but that was at the Dunkin' Donuts Center. You got to have.
Yeah. Wells Fargo was last night. Yeah. The dunk. I'm sorry.
But anyway, when you look at it too, I mean, there are some things. Xavier got most of their points down low in the paint, whereas Providence was able to spread it around you have a rough shooting night when you're like that. But you just don't know. It's as we said, the Big East is the big beast, and we'll talk a little bit more about what's going on in there in a little bit. But let's not make people wait anymore. They don't really want to hear about Providence. They want to hear, unfortunately, what happened last night and what Chris Mack has referred to before as the annual beatdown, the annual butt whooping. And unfortunately, the Wildcats took it to us again, 89-65. And I know you were sitting there watching while we were doing our high school broadcast and moving back and forth, but I could tell by the look on your face as things went that it just wasn't a pretty game for the Muskies.
No, and I remember a key point in the game. They get the Villanova came out. I think they were out 10-2, so we didn't get started very well. And actually, as I saw this happen a couple times, and I look back at the stats. Tyreek Jones had a couple bunnies right under the basket that he missed, and he's been so good this year, basically just going up and dunking that. And he missed some important points. Important point there, they did fight back early and got it down to 22-17. They had it down by 5, and I think with the ball, and didn't score. And then the Villanova Wildcats went on another run and edged it out to 13 points at half. And then again, they made a little run to start the second half, got it down to 10. Again, I think they had it to 10 and had the ball. It looked like we could get it back into single digits. Never happened. And from there on out, it was at times they played pretty well, but they were trading baskets with the Wildcats, so they weren't making up any ground. And probably the biggest concern of last night, there's a lot of concerns going on last night.
Yeah.
But one big concern, and it's kind of been a problem all along, but the fact that the offense has been so efficient this year, it's been kind of hidden, is the defense. They're giving up a lot of points. They gave up a lot of points from the three-point line to the Wildcats. We know they've always shot threes well, and so that's a concern. But the fact about that's something that can be fixed. Here was a point, and I was just read this a little bit before we came online. I didn't hear Chris Mack's press conference last night. I did read a couple of his comments. He didn't seem, I guess the whole overtone of the the press conference, he basically was sitting there and what's wrong, I guess, was the major question being asked. And he kind of said he wasn't quite sure. He was still processing it. I think he was a little perplexed why they weren't playing well. But the offense in the last 2 games just hasn't been able to overcome that defensive performance. It's been kind of lackluster all through the year. It hasn't been what we've come to know as defense from the Musketeers. But again, I feel positive about that, and the fact that I think Chris Mack, watching him the last 9 years, his teams get better defensively as the season goes on. And if it's a problem, it's going to be addressed. Jay Wright pointed out that Villanova wasn't playing very good defense at the end of December. But the thing, and here's not to make excuses, but here's what the Musketeers haven't had that the Wildcats did have, and he said it's how they improved their defense. They had a whole week off from December 30th to January 6th, 7 full days. They didn't play. And he said that's what you need if you got a major problem. Because if you're playing Tuesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, and that's what the Musketeers have had. They haven't had a break since finals exam back on December 9th, where they had a whole week off. And, of course, that week, we remember that, they didn't practice much because it was exams. So they haven't had the time to fix major problems yet, because when you're playing twice a week, you got to get ready for whoever you're playing and put in the offense and the defense. And you can't go back and work on fundamentals, basics of your defense to improve it. And the Musketeers have that coming at the end of January. They'll have a week off beginning with, I think it's January 24th. So if we can trudge through the next 4 games, and I think 3 of them are at home, and we know what an advantage the Cintas Center is, if we can get to that first week off, I think, and stay healthy and not lose any games that we should, and at least win those 3, at home, I think the Musketeers will be okay. It's a long season.
Well, we got to see. It is a long season, and I love your optimism. But there, like I said before, there are holes in the dike, and we saw them again last night. You know, when a team shoots 55% against you, there is a defensive difficulty there, and it has to be addressed. To me, though, the telling stat is this: 15 turnovers. This is something you talk about a lot, and Villanova ended up with 18 points off turnovers, and also the thing you already mentioned, you know, they 12 from 30, almost 40% from the free throw line. Xavier just 3 for 17, so they were shutting us down from 3. But luckily the free throw shooting kept back. But again, Trayvon Blewett had a bad game. You take him out, and they had a really good game from the arc. But those turnovers are what do it. And part of that is, by the way, Villanova plays, and they pressure you, and they get them. But watching some of the highlights, and some of them it was just sloppy play. So it could be, you're right, the Muskies are just tired, and they go do it. And you know, this isn't the time of year to be tired with the week that's coming up, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I'd also put it this way, Jim. I mean, I think their key players just outplayed our key players.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. Blewett and McKira, and I'm sure they would be the first to admit, did not bring their A game in either one of those games. Yeah, we've talked about for the last 2 years about the turnovers, and I think it is a key stat. I think the key number is 10. Keep it in single digits, and you give yourself a chance to win. And a player who I think is getting better, but he's a freshman, and he plays like a freshman sometimes. Although he played fairly well last night, that's Paul Scruggs, the backup point guard. He's getting better, and he's getting better. But again, if you watch the game, Villanova, he had 5 turnovers. And basically it was him not understanding what they were doing, goading him into throwing a lazy pass where they were going to pick it off. And, of course, it was an easy slam dunk at the end. You know, he's got to improve on that. I mean, you take those 5 turnovers away, now you're back to the 10. And, again, we don't expect Paul Scruggs to play perfectly, but he had been playing a lot better. In fact, had a game or two with no turnovers, and so. But you know, he's a freshman, and he's going to play like a freshman sometimes, especially at the point guard. You know, that's where very athletic and speedy players who are usually defending him can exploit him. So, but again, he's playing better. I think he's going to be a great player. Another guy that's really stepped up is Najee Marshall. Last night, he had, I think, 13 points. And I'm going to say right now, he's going to be a superstar. He's not going to be a superstar this year, but he's going to be a superstar. This kid's got all kinds of talent. He's 6'7". He can handle the ball. He can shoot the three. He's going to be the next, one day we may be talking about Najee Marshall and see his jersey hanging from the rafters. I think he's that good. It's not going to happen this year. He's just a part of the team because we got a lot of talented players. The other positive from both games, and of course the boards are exploding now, but it's Kerem Kanter. If anybody's played well, if there's a silver lining in those 2 losses, it's Kerem Kanter. What he had 24 against Providence, and I think he had 16 again last night. In fact, last night he was 6 for 7 from the field. And, again, that experience that he has, he is a graduate student. It's going to, I think, pay off. Here's the question being asked on the board, and it's valid, I think. Not sure. It'll be interesting to see what happens. But with the performance of Kaiser Gates in the last 3 weeks and the performance of Kerem Kanter in the last 3 weeks, should Kerem be starting over him? Or someone said even put Kanter in to start and bring Blewett off the bench. And, of course, the other major question we can address, too, it's all over the talk boards, and is Trayvon Blewett hurt? And Chris Mack did address that last night, I guess, in his press conference, and I think this is the truth. Is he hurt? Yes. Is he hurt where he shouldn't be playing? No, because I don't think Chris Mack would be putting him out there and starting him if he felt that he needed time off. I think he's got some nagging injuries, and may not get better. And I think if you'd ask Chris Mack, I haven't heard him say this, but in his light, I would say he would probably say everybody's hurt and beat up a little bit at this point. Everybody's got players that, a little bit sore ankle or whatever. So, but the one thing that does concern me, and we know he's had some shoulder problems, and here's the stat or the last two games, the thing that really is alarming to me is his free throws. I think he was 1 for 5 and 2 for 5 in those last two games. And if you've ever watched Trayvon Blewett play, and even this year, he doesn't miss free throws. So something there is not right. But it'll be interesting to see. I'd like to have Chris Mack's salary. I wouldn't want to have his responsibilities.
Yeah, but that's why he does make that salary. But we're talking a lot about there. But let's not forget that Villanova played a butt thumping game. And when you can unload your bench against a top 10 team, you have played very well. And I think all the stars that are there and the way Jay Wright builds the team, a special mention has to go to Jalen Brunson, who I think is building a potential player of the year resume. I mean, almost all of his numbers are improved from last year. Everybody's talking about Trae Young, but this guy's right up there with him, and he really runs that team. 19 points, 5 assists, shooting almost 60% from the field and almost 50% from three-point range. And he's decreased his turnovers and increased his assists. I think that is, when you talk about Trayvon Blewett, that could be a big difference too. Trayvon is working through, of course, some nagging injuries, and he did that in last year's tournament, if you remember as well. And the only thing that can really help that is rest and maybe that week at the end. But kudos to Coach Wright and the way he got them up, and he said that he thought this was very important, and what you put it on, that he thought they were playing lackadaisical defense and they had to change it, and they certainly came out blazing against the Muskies to prove that they are still the owners of the Big East.
Yeah, you talk about Jalen Brunson. I've always had a lot of respect for him, and he can beat you in so many ways because he has a big body, and in fact, I think he's 6'5". A lot of times, even though he plays guard, he will post up, knowing that he can pretty much take whoever's guarding him. If they're his height, that they're a natural guard, he can take them down low, and they really just can't stop him because he's so physical. And I think you're right. He's going to be in the conversation for Player of the Year. But they're very, very good, especially their starting five. Again, if there is an advantage, and again, we get to play again February 17th. I'm sure that is circled on a lot of calendars on the Xavier campus. If we have an advantage, it's that we are deeper than they are, I believe. But when your first five, especially maybe your top three, are not playing very well, if the bench is playing well, you're still not going to win. But if that top five can play up to what we know they can, and then you add the depth of the bench playing well and scoring and maybe being able to stay fresh, I think we have an advantage over the Wildcats. So, again, it's still early in the Big East season, so I'm optimistic. Of course, I'm always optimistic. What am I going to do?
Yeah, and that's why you got me here to counterbalance. It would be all blue otherwise. But let's look at the Big East here for a little bit. Not a whole lot going on there, and it's going to be, like you say, week to week. As we look at the start, one of the disappointments now is St. John's, who's at 0-5. I thought they would be tougher. You were on the fence about them. Creighton's obviously their Providence. The teams that we're talking about, you've got 4 teams in the top 25, and 3 probably on the cusp of it with the way Providence, Butler, and Marquette have been playing. And that leads us to, how the Big East goes. Seton Hall got all the way up to number 13 and then goes to Wisconsin and gets thumped by the Golden Eagles of Marquette.
Yeah, and so I got a question for you here. Follow with me here. Who's in first place right now?
Creighton.
Who do the Musketeers play next?
Yeah, we'll get to the Xavier schedule coming up. We're talking about the other teams in the Big East, Mr. Blue. I know it's about Xavier basketball, but you got to keep your nose to the horizon. And the question was about Marquette and Seton Hall. And you had some nice comments about that last night when we talked about how hard it is to go in there and play, and when those guys are hitting their threes.
Oh, yeah, Marquette, again, what I said last night, because they just thumped. Who did they thump the other night? Oh, Seton Hall, who was undefeated. Okay, follow me.
You better listen to the question before you answer it. That would help, yeah.
What I said last night, and I'll reiterate, that when Marcus Howard and Rousey, the two guards, when they're hitting threes, they can beat anybody in the country. And, of course, Marcus Howard, of course, went for the 52 against Providence, at Providence, and they beat him in overtime. And then they thumped Seton Hall, who was the last team that was undefeated and was at the top of the standings before Tuesday night. And, again, Seton Hall, very talented team. They got Angel Delgado, leads the country in rebounds, and 3 or 4 guys that can light it up. They're both very strong teams there in the middle. You know, you look at the standings are kind of about where we thought things would be, and they're going to shake out. And then let's talk about another team here who goes from the highest of highest to now they've lost 3 in a row, I think, is Butler. You know, Butler, whipped Villanova, just shot the lights out and beat them in Hinkle, and I think they've lost 3 in a row since that win, or at least 2. In fact, somebody mentioned on one of the Xavier boards last night, if you want to read about dread and gloom, go read the Butler board right now, because those people are not very happy. So the Big East is, for fans, what have you done for me lately? Again, what I've said, have you been paying attention? The winner for the Big East is going to have how many losses? What have I said?
3 or 4. You say it over and over.
4.
Yeah.
Now,
in the Big East.
Is Villanova going to have 3 or 4? Maybe 3, 4 might be a stretch for them. Although you never know. Again, it's they may hit a bad stretch where they're not hitting, and things happen and injuries, and so but the Big East is. And here's another thing that I was thinking about last night. Again, in my positivity, is 10, 12 years ago, that game last night reminded me of games we had a lot of times. I'd have to go back and research it. But I remember when we were in the A-10, we would go to Dayton, and Dayton would blow us out up there in UD Arena, beat us by 20 or 30 points. And, oh, my gosh, what's wrong with this team, and blah, blah, blah. Well, and it seemed like we always played up there first. They would come back down here, and, of course, you remember the stat, Dayton has not won in Cincinnati still. Of course, they don't play much anymore. That's kind of a series I'd like to see, maybe a non-conference renewed. But they haven't won in Cincinnati since Jimmy Carter was president. Mm-hmm. So, but here's the thing. That was the A-10. This is the Big East, Xavier fans. So if Villanova is now our Dayton, that's okay, because that shows how far we've come. And we're playing at the top of the game now. We're playing some of the best teams in the nation, and one of at least the top 5 conferences in the country. And I think most people have it rated about the 2nd or 3rd right now. So
well, let me finish up a couple thoughts that I had here on the Big East, and then we'll get back to your favorite subject, and you can talk more about that. A couple things. The Butler's lost 3 in a row. The number 5 Xavier, number 21 Seton Hall, and number 25 Creighton. All of them close games. So right now, no need for gloom and doom there for sure. The reason I brought up Seton Hall is I think they've got the toughest week of anybody coming in. They've got to play Georgetown. Of course, we're not sure which Georgetown team's going to show up. It could be the one that almost beat Butler and just thumped a fading St. John's on St. John's home court, or the one that Creighton walked all over just a couple games ago. And they might end up being more of a wild card than we thought. But then Seton Hall also has to face Creighton on Wednesday, and the following Saturday, they have to go to Rhode Island, who might be in a position to hold home court again. So big week for Seton Hall, and obviously they're going to drop from that number 13 spot. But you're right, a lot of things going on throughout there, and one of their other losses is to that Rutgers team that almost beat Michigan State last night. But let's get to the Muskies, and I'm sure you'll have some some quick thoughts on that, but let's get to the Muskies and what's going on this week.
Well, again, they returned to the Cintas on Saturday, although, something pops up. I see that you keep saying you need to stop saying it. They play at 2 o'clock on Saturday, and you kind of think that maybe has a little bit to do with
that's right here in my notes. First thing is they come in, but it is a Saturday afternoon tip, and they've had problems with it.
But again, it's back at the Cintas Center. It's against right now the first place team. So, come 4 o'clock Saturday afternoon, all could be well back in the Xavier Nation. We can get a few people off the ledge and move on. And then, of course, we got the follow-up on, I believe it's Wednesday night, the St. John's Red Storm coming in. The thing that worries me about that game is they are not as bad as their 0-5 Big East record shows, and they may be due for a win, and that kind of worries me. I kind of hope whoever they play on Saturday, they get their first win. You might have that schedule sitting in front of you, and maybe that they'll get that, so they won't be so play that game that they finally break out and win a game. So that worries me. But Xavier basically needs to worry about themselves. Creighton's a very good team, but I don't think they're quite as strong as they've been. And I think if you look at Creighton's schedule, I think they've played 3 or 4 games at home already, and the Century Link Center out in Omaha is one of the toughest venues in all of college basketball. And in fact, the fact somebody beat them there out there this year was surprising. So, again, we're home. The crowd, I think the crowd's been great at Cintas Center. I mean, Chris Max even said a couple of those comeback wins. He said the crowd was so important. And, you can say, hey, it's 94 feet long every place you go, and the baskets are 10 feet high, and you shoot free throws from 10 feet or whatever, and but there's a 15 feet. But that crowd is so important in college basketball. It's emotion, and that's why it's such a fun game, because the environment sometimes does affect the outcome, and as a fan, you kind of feel like you're part of it. You're part of the team. You help them win.
Yeah, and it's going to be this is where I got to continue. Again, I love your optimism and your bleed blue, but this Creighton team that you're kind of poo-poo a little bit. Yeah, they've had 3 home games with 2 road games, and their only losses are to top 25 teams at the time. The loss at home you referred to was Baylor. They lost to Gonzaga on the road and Seton Hall on the road. I hope that it's not, and you go back to, I do think there's an issue with the afternoon time, something about Friday night coming in that you're just not used to, whatever. You got to remember that the DePaul game was a 2 o'clock game, so it's not an isolated thing or on the way, and they struggled with that. I'm with you. I'm hoping they're going to bounce back strong. I think they really need to, and this is the game to do it on. Another top 25 team. If they do lose, it could be a scenario like last year where Xavier dropped briefly out of the top 25 before they crawled back in. And I'm with you. That St. John's team is going to be dangerous. They're sitting at 0-5, but came into the Big East schedule 10-2 in their preseason. And the schedule that they've got, you can be optimistic for them, but it's not going to be pretty. They have to play Villanova on Saturday before they come in and play the Muskies, and then they have to go to Georgetown, who just beat them at home, and then play Creighton and Butler. So it doesn't look like there's that win on the sidelines for them. But, again, it's the Big East, and you just don't know what's going on. And then we've got to face a Seton Hall team as well. So I think this is a big week for the Muskies to try to get it back on course. And like you said, if it is a case of they just need to get to that week of rest, this is a week where they've got to bail water and hold home court advantage and move forward into February and be stronger than last year.
Yeah, you are correct. So St. John's plays Villanova on Saturday, huh?
Yeah.
Where's that game played at?
Just had that here, and then I went to something else. They are playing that game in New York. So, but again. Okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes, Jim, you got to look a little deeper. New York, they just lost 2 straight games in New York to the teams at the bottom of the Big East. They lost to DePaul and Georgetown in New York. So you hope they have the home field advantage, but it doesn't seem to be working out for the Redmen right now. And hopefully they don't get hot on the road either as things come up and they travel to the Cintas Center. So big week for the Muskies, and let's put this past week behind us and build into it and take down the Blue Jays, who also, before they're coming in to see us, and then they've got to turn right around and play Seton Hall. So it's a big week for them as well as every week is, as you often point out, in the Big East.
Yeah, and I think looking at that Creighton game too, kind of looking ahead, they're led by Marcus Foster and Kyrie Thomas, and they're both guard players, big scorers at 19 and 15 points each. And, of course, we know those are teams that have given the Musketeers problems, teams that do have those quick guards, and Marcus Foster, he will give them problems. But the advantage, again, I think, is the inside presence of the Creighton Blue Jays, I think, cannot match the inside presence of the Xavier Musketeers. I fully expect that what you'll see, especially in the Cintas Center, is they're gonna hammer it down low to start that game and go inside out, so to speak, and especially with the way they've been shooting 3-pointers. And the big man for the Creighton Blue Jays is he's from Slovenia, I believe. Martin, I don't know if I'm saying his name, Krampel. And I've seen him play. I've watched the Blue Jays play probably 3 or 4 games, and he's putting up 12 points a game and 8 rebounds, but he's not as physical as the 3 post players for the Musketeers. So I'm thinking that they might be able to take advantage and get off to a good start. And Chris Mack, again, I was just reading his comments. He said, we're missing our swagger right now. So basically saying we're not playing with confidence. And, again, hopefully the Musketeers returning home to a friendly environment, they can get a little bit of that swagger back and get things going in the right direction.
Well, that's what we're looking for. And that game, again, it's 2 o'clock on Saturday. I'm sure you'll be down there. We'll be back with you next Thursday.
I hope I will be down there.
Oh, come on now. Don't start with this snowmageddon stuff. It's a little snow. I mean –
well, I'm going to be in Columbus is the problem. I got to get back to Cincinnati.
Oh, you got to get back to that game. Okay, well,
yeah.
Make sure your buddy has safety. It's only an hour and a half. It's not too bad. That's okay. I don't have to worry about it.
You know me. It's going to have to be pretty tough to not get back. But if they close 71 from Columbus to Cincinnati on Saturday morning, I'm still thinking it's not going to be as bad. In fact, I did read a report where it looks like the bad part's going to be overnight Friday, and things are going to start clearing up Saturday morning. So I'll be back, I think. But I do have contingency plans for my tickets in case I don't get back. So you just got to plan ahead. 95% chance I'll be sitting there and rooting the Musketeers on.
Got it. You'll be there if you can get it with Plan B, C, and D all in place. I don't have to worry about it. I'm going to be in Phoenix, and it's 75 out there.
Okay. Tough week for you, Jeff. Huh?
Yeah, tough week.
And you're leaving tomorrow, right? No, just kidding.
Right. Yeah.
I know you're leaving today.
That's a joke. That's a Jim. He must have asked me 7 times last night when I was leaving to make sure we get our cast on, and he kept me. I feel very much for Jim's wife, Michelle. I feel commiserate with her.
Well. First of all, let's qualify. What was I doing? I was doing color on a high school basketball game while I was watching the Musketeers on my computer. So you were like the third most important thing sitting at that table right there.
Well, like I say, that's typical. But you also had me twice before the game started. You just in your own little world. Let's not go there. That's time to go to the trivia and tidbits. I mean, we're getting trivial here, so let's go on. What do you got for me today?
Well, my only last comment was, and sometimes my color last night was, Yeah, that team's in white and that team's in blue.
Your color was black and white last night, but we won't go into that because you were distracted. But it was good to have you there.
You were just happy I was there.
At every point of my life. So, have you got some trivia for us or not?
Got a good trivia question for you. In fact, I thought this up last night and was going to do my research this morning. I forgot, but that's why I was letting you talk because I was doing my homework.
That's what I thought. You talk about me stalling. You go ahead.
Here's the question. So we're talking about the Big East and the championship, and of course we played Villanova last night, who we all know has won the first four. Well, some people refer to new era of the Big East. But here's the question: what was the last team not named Villanova that could say they were Big East champions?
Well, it's got to be in the old configuration of the Big East, so that opens it up a lot. You got to remember back then, a lot of powerful teams. That would have been the fifth year, so it would be 2010, 2011.
12.
Well, I'm talking about the beginning of the season. I'll just go out there because it's a safe bet and say Syracuse.
Syracuse, actually it was the 12-13 season, I'm sorry. Syracuse finished 5th that year.
Yeah, but that could happen in the Big East.
Yeah, well, there was they had about 16 teams or something in there. One other guess. I'll give you two more guesses.
Oh, you're really stalling now. You just want to see me twist on the spit. No, guys, just tell us.
Yeah.
I don't want the guesses.
Well, it's kind of a trick question because actually it was a three-way tie. The Louisville Cardinals, the Georgetown Hoyas, and the Marquette Golden Eagles. Is that what they're called?
Yeah.
I still want to say Warriors because in my mind they'll always be the Warriors. So it was actually a three-way tie. So it's kind of a trick question. All three of those finished 14-4 that season. Actually, Louisville had the best record, and they won the tournament. They ended up 35-5 and were the Big East tournament champions that year. So it's going to happen one of these times. Maybe still this year. I'm still positive that maybe.
Long season. We're only about halfway through the first rotation. So a lot of things can happen. And Louisville, of course, announced their presence last night by beating number 23 Florida State. So they're still in up and down there in the ACC. Lots of history to the Big East going way back to when they just tried to get things together there on the East Coast. Your question on Tuesday on our Trogcast about when we're talking about Texas Tech and the two coaches that had won NCAA champions, but not with Texas Tech. If you weren't listening, folks, that's Bobby Knight and Tubby Smith both coached Texas Tech after they had won it. Let me double-check another little trivia thing that I knew about Bob Knight. I want to see who else it applied to, which is Bob's one of the only few players who won an NCAA championship as a player and as a coach. Of course, he did it with the 1960 Ohio State team and 3 times with Indiana. I won't put you through it, but do you know any of the other coaches who may have won as a player and a coach?
So there are others.
There are others, yeah. In fact, I'll tell you, there are 2 that won in the tournament era and 1 that has been designated as a NCAA top team before they started their tournament in late 1930. And none of these names will surprise. There's only one name I think you would struggle to really find.
Well, that is the old-time one. I don't know, Adolph Rupp?
That's a great guess. It's not. It's actually John Wooden, who was with the Purdue team in 32, right? and as an Indiana boy, I'm surprised you didn't know that. And then he won multiple ones at UCLA. But the one that would have been harder to get was Rupp's protege, his successor.
Oh. And he played for UCLA and coached, but he won a national championship.
Rupp's successor.
Oh, okay.
Joe B. Hall, who won as a player with Coach Rupp, and then also took the Wildcats to the championship. The third one, that won with the tournament, of course, it was Dean Smith, who won as a player with Kansas and twice.
Yeah, I was thinking along the lines of North Carolina, Kansas. Somebody probably there. I know there's been some player coaches there, but I wasn't real familiar with Dean Smith's playing days.
And we almost had one last season. Dawn Staley, the coach at South Carolina, was just 1 point away. Well, actually, you could say 2 points, so they lost by one. She finished second in the NCAA when she played for Virginia, leading them to the title game to Stanford in 1992, and then, of course, won her first NCAA championship. So there's possibilities. And there's lots of coaches out there that could still do it. I mean, Bobby Hurley at Arizona State, Wake Forest, Sandy Manning, Georgetown's Patrick Ewing, UCLA, Steve Alford. They all have championships as a player, and who knows will be the next one. And the other little that what also brought me up was that started me with reminded me because on this date, 1990, was when Bobby Knight became the winningest coach in Big Ten history with his 229th victory. He ended up his Big Ten career with 353, and he put that in perspective. I believe this is a leader. I wasn't able to fully quote, but it makes sense. In his 23rd year, Tom Izzo just this year is at 259 wins. So he would have only passed Bobby Knight had he stopped in 1990 with those 229. But lots of great history there. And baseball history, some people say it was for the good, some people say it was for the worse. It was in this date in 1973 that the American League owners adopted the designated hitter rule. We will go, of course, with our weekly Trogcast on Tuesday. Just watch the Grueling Truth Network for when that's posted. Might be at a slightly different time as, like I say, I will be traveling, be out in the great state of Arizona with the time difference and schedule of events out there. It might be a little different. And then we'll be back to you next Thursday with our weekly Razorcast. And we thank you all for listening. And until that time, unless Jim has something else to add.
No, all I got to say is go Muskies.
Go Muskies.